Okay, well, we will get started. Firstly, what we're going to do to start is we'll start with a wee poll, and then we'll do some introductions before we get started with the slides. But firstly, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has joined. There is both people that are our customers and many that aren't, and so there's a good mix in here, and we'll try and cater it accordingly. So first thing we're going to do, just while we're waiting for a few people, feel the slight late entrance to join, is we're going to chuck up a poll just to kind of get an idea of who we've got joining us today, and we may also cater some of our, I guess, some of our messaging based on what we receive. So yeah, it'll be good to get some answers. Here we go. That should come up on your screen now.
Oh, it's going to let me answer too.
Yep. Whoever voted them's quick. I was still reading the title. Interesting. Very interesting. Just wait for a couple more. Just people that grabbing a coffee. Okay, I think I'll let it go for a minute to catch the stragglers. Okay. Right, we will share the results. So as you can see, it's a big mix. No one's just using SharePoint, which is probably about right. Although no, some organizations we come across do. So there are a few that are not using any of them, which is good. Hopefully, because you're attending this webinar, and it is not the most big, it's not a complete beginner webinar. So hopefully you're familiar with the tools and their purposes. Several are using just Teams, which is cool, and that could be based on the COVID comms need that happened when we had to work from home. No one is using just SharePoint, and just one or two are using OneDrive. And then most, or the majority, are using Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint lightly, which probably fits this webinar well. And then there are several that are using those three extensively, which is great. So the majority of the group are actually using all three of those tools, and there should be something for everyone in here for all of those people. So thank you very much for answering there. All right, I'll put the polls away. There's going to be more polls as we go through. In fact, we're going to have a bit of a quiz. Thank you again for joining, and this should be a really good session. It's going to be run by Lucy and Alex, not myself, and just introducing them. So Lucy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. So I guess the majority of my role is in the service delivery space with the IT team. So making sure that we're delivering what we need to our customers. But I'm a pretty passionate processes and systems person as well. So I think me and Alex have worked pretty closely together on sort of the SharePoint internally and how we use Teams and things. So I'm probably here as a bit of a passion project, making sure that we're using them the best we can internally. And sort of helping understand how we can shape them up for you guys as well. And Alex?
And I'm Alex Vernal, and I'm a systems engineer and technical advisor at the IT team. So I do a lot of OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint deployments for my customers. So yeah, I've set up many, and hopefully I'll be able to help everyone understand how to use the tools a little bit better.
Yeah, Alex is one of our key guys with SharePoint. A lot of our technicians are aware of the tool, but Alex is particularly au fait with it, and gotten more ingrained in it with obviously the amount of activity that's been required from COVID. So yeah, he's going to do the demonstrations, which is going to be great, and feel free to ask questions during the session. So what we'll do is there's a quick Q&A button, throw your questions up. What they'll do is they'll distract us while we're talking, but that's cool. And if we think we should answer it immediately, we'll probably throw it out. If not, we will touch on it at the end. And there should be plenty of time for questions. So yeah, please chuck them in. Very good. Why don't we kick it off?
All right. So I'll just take it away with a quick intro, I suppose, of overview of what this webinar is, who it's for. So Colin's obviously helpfully popped up the poll, so we've got a good understanding of where you fit in this sort of area. But generally, this is going to be most useful if you're already utilizing Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint at some sort of level. You're aware of it. You might have attended previous webinars, and you're using these, most of them or all of them at some level in your day-to-day. People who are keen to understand how to get deeper with some of these, and how they should be maybe bringing best practices into the daily way of using it as well. And people who are keen to understand which one you are supposed to use when, because you can do a lot with each of these tools, and sometimes it's not too clear where you're supposed to go for different needs as well. So that's sort of an overview of who this is for. What are we going to be covering? So we're going to do some key examples. So that's the wee quiz that Colin was talking about. Examples of what sort of scenarios you might come across and what you're best to use when you come up to them. SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive will jump into some good practice, build guidance, and just key points for them as well. And there's going to be demos of the key areas in each of those tools as well. And then at the end, we'll jump into some adoption and governance tips, and then obviously do Q&A. What we're not going to cover. So as Colin mentioned, it's not an entry-level webinar. There is going to be a wee bit of the back-end side of things that Alex is going to demo for us. So we're not going to be covering why you should be using these tools, assuming that if you're in here, you already sort of understand what they are and what the benefits of them are. It's not really going to be a training session and how-tos and things, build guides. It's going to be more of an overview of what they are and why you should be, when you should be using them. And it's not going to be a migration or adoption demo. If you want to do that, book in some time with Alex, who's the expert on that sort of area as well. Now, about the IT team, Colin.
Yes. So for those of you customers in here, please suffer for a moment. But for those that don't know the IT team, just a quick background on us. So we were formed in 2011. Now we have around 30 staff with 4 offices around New Zealand. Office 365 has been a big part of what we do since its inception. And the core of what we do is managed services and IT support. But pretty much anything that plugs into a wall and turns on, we probably support in some way. And we provide services all over New Zealand, so not just based in the offices that we're in. Apologies, I've got some family noise in the background. But anything IT related that you may need help with, please feel free to reach out to us. And we've got some email information at the end that you can use to contact.
Brilliant, thank you. All right, so we're going to kick into some polls to get started with. Colin, hopefully you're going to pop these up, and Alex, you'll probably talk to a wee bit more background around each of them. So if we could have the first poll, Colin, here we go.
You thought I wasn't going to do it, didn't you?
So which tool are you going to be using if you're sending out a company-wide notification?
There's no punishments or prizes. This is kind of poll-based education.
And we're going to do a half dozen or so of these as well, so we'll try and whip through them relatively rapidly.
There we go. So yeah, it looks like 76% of respondents said Teams, and yes, Teams would be the correct answer for this one. SharePoint potentially could be the correct answer, but SharePoint requires that someone goes and has a look at the information, whereas if it's a notification, you probably want to use Teams so it pops up on their screens. And so that, can we have the next one, please? All right, so which tool would you use if you're storing business-related user documents or files? So this would be things that would normally go in your My Documents folder if you're familiar with Windows 7.
Five more seconds, get your answers in.
There you go. So yeah, 62% of people have said that it would be OneDrive, which is the correct one. If it's your user-related files and documents and not things that you want to necessarily let everyone see, OneDrive is the tool to be using. So this is the cloud storage that you are to use for individual purposes, individual company purposes. It's not personal documents, but for company documents.
Next one.
All right, so which tool for storing organization documents across the entire team?
Seconds.
Yep, so 88% of you got this one right. It's SharePoint. So SharePoint is used if you're trying to share files across the organization. The keys in the name with SharePoint is for sharing.
Although technically the other two can be, is that correct, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, Teams in a way is SharePoint in the back end. So yep, you can use that. OneDrive, you can definitely share it with other people, but that's not its primary purpose. Next one, please. So you've got a whole bunch of HR induction information that you want to let someone who's new to the organization quickly be able to read it and get up to speed with your organization policies. What would you use?
Couple more seconds.
Yep, so 54% said SharePoint, and that would be the correct answer. So SharePoint, not only can you use it for sharing files, you can also use it to do static content that people can read. So induction informations, procedures, that kind of thing can all be put on SharePoint. And saying that, Teams is also kind of a correct answer because you can pin information to SharePoint channels, Teams channels, so that are from SharePoint. Yeah, and OneDrive probably wouldn't use in this situation. Next one. So you want to have a organization-wide discussion while working on a project or planning an event. What would you use? Perfect. Teams. Looks like everyone's used it at least once before. Yeah, 96% Teams. Yeah, SharePoint, you can collaborate on it, but Teams is definitely what you would use in this situation. All right, so backing up user data on a workstation. So your desktop, your photos, what tool are you going to use then? Oh, 100%. You have OneDrive. Perfect. OneDrive, personal data, workstation data. Yep. And you can set it up to sync that automatically. Awesome. So you want to collaborate on a live document. What would you use?
Oh, I think I've fallen into a trap with this one. Oops.
Spoiler. Not an easy one, this one. We'll give it another 5 seconds. A few stragglers.
All right, interesting. We'll keep this one up a little bit longer. So for collaborating on a live document, you can actually use all three if you wanted to. SharePoint supports it with SharePoint Online. You can also live edit within Microsoft Teams, and you can also live edit from within OneDrive.
They each have their purpose, and so they're each right answers, aren't they?
They are, all three of them are correct answers.
Poor OneDrive gets no love.
Yeah, sorry, we didn't give you an option to go all three, but yeah, it is all three. So thanks for that. Next slide.
All right, so that's our quiz done. Hopefully it's gotten you guys to start and to think about, you know, these three tools and the fact that they are quite different purposes. Alex is going to kick off with a brief overview.
Yeah, so just very quickly, as you've probably seen from the polls, OneDrive is for files that you're working on personally and you don't particularly want to share with everyone in your team. Maybe you want to share them with one or two people manually, but you want to keep control of them yourself. So that you'd want them to be like on your machine or in an area that you control. That's OneDrive. SharePoint on the other side, on the right-hand side, is more for an intranet. If you're familiar with a historic kind of intranet site, or sharing docs organization-wide. Now, confusingly, when it comes to syncing down onto a local machine, they both use the OneDrive tool to sync. So the OneDrive program syncs both OneDrive and SharePoint, although they're two very distinct things. And Microsoft Teams is kind of in the middle, and it kind of ties into both OneDrive and SharePoint. And that's used for chat, meetings, apps, and calls, but also you can edit and manipulate SharePoint forms, files, etc. using Microsoft Teams. I'll be demoing this again in a minute or so. Thanks for that.
Brilliant.
So an important concept when it comes to those three technologies and just Office 365, or Microsoft 365 as Microsoft are now calling it, is a Microsoft 365 group. You may see this called an Office 365 group. That's what it used to be called up until a few months back when Microsoft did a big renaming push. So if you still see that in documentation or even in Microsoft 365 backend, they're the same thing. So it's very important because that group is a group of identities, a group of people that are used to manage who's in Teams, SharePoint sites, and basically anything else in Microsoft 365. So if you add a member to a Microsoft 365 group, they'll automatically get added to the corresponding team and the corresponding SharePoint site. And if you create a SharePoint site or SharePoint team site, it will create a Microsoft 365 group. And if you create a team in Microsoft Teams, it also creates a Microsoft 365 group. So this is kind of the glue, the central group that has all the members for all the technologies underneath. Thanks for that. Next one. So, SharePoint. We'll quickly talk about some SharePoint and best practices and how it's all laid out.
Excellent.
So this is a helpful diagram animation thing that we stole directly from Microsoft. Thank you. Just kind of describing the technologies that are in play with SharePoint and how best to lay it out. I'm not sure. Can we pause this, or is it just going to keep playing?
Nah, we'll keep it running because last time I paused it at
went to the next slide. Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll see there's three different colored sites here. We've got the orange ones, which are known as hub sites. We've got the green ones, which are communication sites, and we've got the blue ones that are team sites. And I will be giving demonstrations of what these are in practice in a second. So the orange ones are hub sites. These are sites that are mainly used for navigation to get to other sites within SharePoint. The green ones are communication sites. So these sites are more like your traditional intranet web pages, where you've got static information. So one or two people edit the content and many people view it. And the blue ones are team sites, so the circles. They are, if you're going to be doing a file server migration up into SharePoint, that's what you'll be using most. And these team sites are used for collaborating with one another, storing and editing documents live together, maybe even a shared mailbox, and yeah, working together on a project, a committee, or a business area or function. But they're all tied together by a hub site. It's one thing to note from this animation is you'll notice some of the sites on the spokes are moving between hubs. So if a team changes its direction slightly and it fits into a different business area, it's pretty easy to jump into the back end and reassign which hub is attached to. But I'll show you how to do that in the back end and what that looks like in practice shortly. So just to reiterate what we've got there, we've got team sites, which are for collaboration, that's working together, storing documents. You've got your mailboxes. You've even got potentially got Microsoft teams. Communication sites is about 1 or 2 people pushing out content, either dynamic or statically to your organization. And hub sites are the connections, the glue that holds them all together. All right, so we'll just jump into a demonstration now. Where is my share screen button? Here it is. So this is SharePoint. We're inside one particular hub called the People Hub. If you remember that diagram we're looking at, that would be one of the yellow ones. And we've got a whole bunch of different links to different sites around the outside. So up at the top here, this is called the navigation bar, and it's set from the hub. So the hub's got the navigation. And if I click on any one of these sites, they'll all have the same navigation. Click edit over here on the right-hand side. You'll see I can quickly add new stuff to this navigation, change the name, say who I want to target, or I can even make a label if I just want to have a drop-down box at the top and then have sites underneath. So if we click through to one of them, let's navigate to a team site. So this is for collaboration. We'll go to the Health, Safety and Wellness Committee. So this is our internal team that we've got made up of 6 members. You can see over here, 6 members who discuss policies, incidents, and all that kind of thing related to health and safety. So you'll see this has got group membership over here on the right. This is the Microsoft 365 group that I was talking about earlier. So each of these people in this particular order are in the Microsoft 365 group. Microsoft group can have 2 types of people within it. You can have owners and members. So an owner has the ability to add members and a member does not. I'm also global admin, so that's why I get that button. So normally what you do for all your different committees and all your different projects or business areas, you'll have 1 or 2 owners for a site and the rest of the people will be members. It's then up to the owner's responsibility to choose who they do or don't want to be within their team. Another way to tell it's a team site other than having the members box up there is this sidebar down the left-hand side. So every single team site has a sidebar that looks like this. So quickly, so you can quickly jump into the conversations, the documents, so the various documents that have been worked on, or any of the other pages. So we've got forms and an incident register, health and safety register, and like a planner so we can track tasks that have been worked on. That's a team site. As you can see, it's all about collaboration, sharing documents, working on with project plans and things like that. Communication site, on the other hand, is trying to communicate a message to the whole organization. So this is a communication site, and you'll see it's missing the permissions up here. And that's because communication sites usually, don't have to be, but usually would be shared with most people in your organization. There's also no bar on the left-hand side here to collaborate on things because it's pretty static. I think Lucy maintains this. So if I click Meet Christchurch, for instance, in this particular one, you can see the staff profiles of all the different people that are in Christchurch. So
helpfully, none of us have actual pictures of our faces, which is slightly unusual for people jumping into here. But
yeah, I don't know if you want to make that a company policy or not. It can definitely be helpful for a new employee who doesn't know who's who, just to be able to click on, say, Alan, and then this automatically picks up who Alan works with most. It just uses Microsoft Magic to do that. What his role is, his phone number, etc., etc. So this is just one example of what you could use a communication site for. For instance, we could have COVID-19 resources, which is about things you can download. Maybe you could have one to do with company forms, so you could fill out your health and safety things that way. So anyway, I'll show you some of the back-end systems on how this all works. So we jump across to the SharePoint Admin Center. This is what the SharePoint Admin Center looks like. So you can get this from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, which is admin.microsoft.com. You can go down to SharePoint, and then that brings up this, and then click on active sites. So you can get a list of all the SharePoint sites that are in your organization. Just note, in order to be able to do this, you have to be a SharePoint administrator or a global administrator. So you'll see each one of these different sites lines up with the various sites that we've put along the top in this hub. And over here, you'll see which hub they're all associated to. So we've got the People Hub, which is a hub site, and then the Health, Safety and Wellness Committee is associated to the hub. It's very, very easy to change which hub a site is associated with. Just click on Hub, change Hub Association, and then you can see I could move it to whatever hub I wanted. It's also very easy to make a new hub. To do that, I just make a new communication site. So go create new communication site, fill out the details, and click on the hub once it's selected, and that button will be registered as hub site will become available. Of course, since this one's already associated with the hub site, you can't change it. Register the hub site, fill out who can add and remove pages to the hub, okay, and it will register as a hub site like that. While I'm in here, I'll show you one or two other settings to do with sites. If you want to, if you're a SharePoint administrator and you've been locked out of a particular site, maybe whoever was the owner of the site has left the organization without handing it over to someone else, you can click on this, click on permissions, and then you can add yourself as an administrator to regain control of the group. There's some other policies in here as well. This may be of interest. External sharing. You can change the settings on who's allowed to share what information on the SharePoint site. I wouldn't automatically go only people in your organization know external sharing for every single site. If you do that, people will start trying to find other ways to share documents off your SharePoint. If you use this in a limited form and only put it onto the sensitive sites, people will get the message that they're not meant to be sharing these particular files pretty easily. Anyway, down here, you'll also see Microsoft 365 group connected. Yes, and that's the Microsoft 365 group that I was talking about earlier. You'll see that it's a team site, not a communication site. Choose wisely when you're making your sites. You cannot change this. If you make a team site, it's a team site forever. If you make a communication site, it's a communication site forever. Change the site name and the site address up here as well. Awesome, so I think that's probably a good wee introduction into how modern SharePoint's meant to work. We want to look at some adoption tips now, Lucy.
All right, I'll jump us back into the PowerPoint. Here we go.
Thanks for that. So here's a few tips on how to get people using SharePoint. Obviously, a lot of it's web-based and people are not going to go there of their own free will if you don't make a carrot or maybe a stick to point them that way. So number one, create some reasons to go there. If you're going to put some company forms or maybe some photos or some documents or something that they have to go there to do, they will go there to do that. Number two, consider your champions in your team. And this is basically where you want to get the managers or people of importance in your organization to be on board and really push the adoption of SharePoint along so everyone will follow them.
And I think combining those first two tips, get people who are going to start directing people there. I'm someone that gets a lot of questions within our team, so part of my role in this is sending back links to SharePoint sites if people ask questions, making sure the answers to their questions are up on SharePoint and sending them the link so that they, get used to actually going there and hunting down that information themselves. So it's a pretty good way to combine getting your champions sort of spearheading adoption across your team.
Yeah. The other thing is if it really, really looks good, if you've got good visual appeal, if you get all your graphics nicely laid out and you get some cool looking charts and things like that, people will be more likely to go there. If it's just confusing, doesn't make sense, disjointed, people are less likely to go there. So if you've got any graphics design staff on your team, maybe tap them on the shoulder and say, make it look good. And finally, some training may be beneficial. If your team is slightly less technically literate or scared of new things, then doing some training and just holding their hand a little bit can really be beneficial for adoption.
Particularly if it's a big change from a system they're currently using. If you're not using anything already, going to this might not be as big of a change, but if you're having to make a complete behavior change to where you're going for things, this is a bit of a crucial one, I'd say.
For sure. Yeah, so by the way, if you've got any questions, just keep them to the end on SharePoint and I'll hopefully answer them all then. Next up, Microsoft Teams. So this is another big of the trifecta of Microsoft 365 technologies. Here's a few key points that I just want to go through. So chat groups versus Teams. So many of you, well, I think most of you had used Teams in some form or another. You would have noticed that on the left-hand side, you could choose between chat groups or Microsoft Teams. And you may be wondering why you'd use one and not the other. Chat is really useful if you just want to do a one-on-one conversation or maybe an ad hoc, a quick fire one to a small group of people, but you don't want to use them long-term if you're working on a project or something like that. It's because it's very hard to add new members to a quick fire group like that. So if it's a long-term project or something that's established, consider making a team. A team, on the other hand, is made if there is a longer-term thing that's going on, not just a 1 hour quick chat. So if you've got a project, committee, something inside the organization, then consider making a team. And you can have multiple channels under each team. Now, channels, it's good to probably have, I don't know, 3 or 7 of them underneath each team. And the reason why you'd have channels is so that way you can chat about different topics within that team without, what's the best way of putting this, Lucy? Without hiding content.
Without conversations sort of overriding each other. And if we use the health and safety one as an example, your committee might have a channel where they're discussing incidents or where incidents get reported to. You might have a channel where they're talking about wellness activities. So it's just sort of keeping those conversations separate and not getting all mixed up together.
Yeah. And obviously in a chat group, there's no way to stop that happening. It's just a flow of conversation. So if someone stepped away for 5 minutes, they come back and it's moved on. They won't ever see that content. Whereas in a team, you can see it. So teams, channels, and limitations. So the limit on the number of teams that you can have is 500,000. And you want to try to aim for between 3 to 7 channels per team. So if you've got more than 7 channels per team, it's going to be hard for people to look at all of them because Microsoft Teams starts hiding them. And you're probably trying to do too much with your team. So in that case, what you'd normally do is maybe relook at it and say, maybe we should make 2 teams for this because we're trying to do too much with it. Again, if you've got a whole bunch of teams that are just 1 or 2 channels, maybe your teams are way too focused. Maybe you're making too many of them. You'll see there that self-evolution versus rigid structure. I'm of the camp, and so is Microsoft actually, that you should let everyone make teams at will to better keep conversations in their own little areas. If you make it really rigid and make it difficult for people to make teams themselves, maybe a long process they've got to go through that takes a few days, people just won't use teams. They'll just stick with chat groups, which they can quickly fire up and start using. Of course, you do need someone in the back end just keeping an eye on it, pruning it, and keeping things in check. But also, a bit of conversation with your team, just saying, hey guys, make sure you don't make teams for things that you don't need to make them. Especially if it does look like people are making teams crazily. The last 2 things that I'll demonstrate are Teams tabs and forms and teams. So Teams tabs is a good way in every single team. Along the top, you've got a series of tabs where you can pin important content. In Forms, Teams also fully supports Microsoft Forms. So if you want to have a quick team that people can jump into to fill out a form, I'll show you how to do that shortly.
Brilliant.
So let me share my screen again. Here we go. So I'm going to show Microsoft Teams. So I'm just showing you the Teams view because that's what we're talking about. And you can see we've got all the different teams to do with the various areas in our organization. So down here, you'll see we've got 5 channels. And this is a good size for a team to be. If I click on here and manage team, you'll notice that we've got 5 owners and 25 members and guests because this particular one is for everyone to be able to see it. And These members and guests, this is the Microsoft 365 group, and they'll reflect the same ones, as in the permissions here. 6 owners are all the same. So tabs, I'll just maximize that so we can see a little bit more. Stretch it out along the top here. So you'll see we've got, these are the tabs, and this is a quick fire way of being able to jump and see information about the team. So if I want to see the staying safe and healthy during COVID-19 document, I can click on this here, and it takes me straight to the SharePoint page to do with staying health and safety during COVID-19. Or if I want to fill out the Office checklist form, I can click on the Microsoft form up here, and it takes me straight to the form. Again, this is on Microsoft Forms.
I'll probably just comment on how useful that is as well, because you know, if you've got processes that you need people in your team to follow, and you are already using Microsoft Forms, or Microsoft Forms could be useful for you. A, they're really easy to set up, but B, if you put it into Teams, you know, they've got no excuse not to do it if it's the tool that you guys are using every day. They can access it on their phones. They can access it when they're in the actual Teams channels as well. So it's the ability to add those directly into Teams is incredibly powerful.
Yep. And finally here as well, here's a document. So this isn't a SharePoint page, this is just a Word document. You can also pin that up to the top there as well as looking at just the SharePoint site in general. This is the Health, Safety and Wellness Hub, looks like this. We jump back on SharePoint, you notice it looks exactly the same. While we're on that topic as well, you'll see here we've got documents. I click on the general, you'll see there's 4 files there. And then if I click on the general channel over here, click on files, you'll notice there's 4 files here as well. So that's Teams in a nutshell. I'll quickly show you the admin center of Teams. It's much the same way. Actually, you jump to admin.microsoft.com and then click on Teams. And this will show you the Teams admin center. Gives you some helpful stats. And you'll be able to see the same team, so the same Microsoft 365 group, but within a different interface. So you've got your SharePoint admin center for looking at your SharePoint things, and you've got your teams for managing the Teams functions. So again, if you get locked out of a group, you can add members here as a SharePoint admin. You can look at the various channels, see what kind of site they are, change some settings, you can change the settings with or look at the settings for the team as well. Also within here, because Teams is more than just Teams, you can set up Teams policies, which change whether or not people can like use emojis, share images, all that kind of thing. There's a lot of settings in here, so I won't go through them all, but that's where you go if you want to have a look. Also meetings, meeting policies. So if you're using Teams for meetings, you can say who's allowed to join, what can be shared, what can be recorded, all that kind of things. And yeah, a whole bunch of other things like users and analytics and reports, which is fun to see if people are actually using Teams as much as what they say they are. So you can select all kinds of reports.
Oh, don't do ours. I always come out at the top of this.
I don't know. Let's have a look. It doesn't take a million years. There you go. So you can see that a very clear weekly trend here. And you
Not
can
a lot happening on the weekend is good to see.
No. Here's for the last 90 days, you can see that we've had over 1,000 meetings organized, 7,000 channel messages, 11,000 reactions. Rather impressive numbers there, I think, for Teams usage. Yeah, so that's probably a quick overview of Teams. Do you want to share some adoption tips?
Yeah, so we'll do similar to what we did with SharePoint, just sort of giving some tips around how you can help get this embedded within your organization.
All right, so number one thing to start people using Teams is encouraging the use of calling and video, especially video. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words. I'd say that video does that as well, Lucy, and everyone else. So we've basically made a company policy that you should be using video, and you've got to have a good reason if you're not, just so you can read people's like non-verbal cues and things like that. Calling, definitely. It's a lot faster than typing, and helps create like better communication habits within your organization. We've said make every meeting a Teams meeting. So if you're having a meeting, you might as well make it a Teams meeting. So even if you're in the meeting room, make it a Teams meeting. So people can join from wherever they are. You can also easily record the meeting. So if people can't make it, they can still be involved with what's happened and review it. Thirdly, create reasons to go there, much the same way as SharePoint. If you've got quick links to easy files or easy procedures within Microsoft Teams, or you've got to go there to do something, people will use it. If you don't create any reasons, it will just stay minimized on the taskbar. Now, we all love Zoom. We're using Zoom to do this webinar just so that it's easier to share Microsoft Teams within Zoom. Zoom is great. You can do some pretty cool background effects like this, and you can certainly have large meetings, but it doesn't integrate as well with SharePoint or with anything else like Microsoft Planner, Forms, like Teams does. So if you are using a lot of Microsoft things, it just makes sense to use Teams rather than Zoom. Also, it's probably included in your subscription, Teams, whereas Zoom, if you're having to pay for pro licenses, that can rack up quickly from a cost perspective. And lastly, ensure everyone has decent gear. So that's webcams and microphones. Cheap microphones or laptop microphones are not the greatest to be using in Teams. They pick up a lot of background noise, or they'll be too quiet, and it will really put people off. Sometimes it can only take 1 or 2 bad meetings and people are like, there's no point using this. If everyone's got decent webcams, decent microphones, you don't run into that issue. Yeah.
Can be a bit hard to get your hands on them these days. I know there's still a few stock issues going on because everyone jumped on board getting them a few months back, but definitely worth doing if you're planning on sticking with this long term. All right, last section, Alex.
OneDrive.
So
right.
where does it fit in?
Sure. So OneDrive is probably one of the first tools that Microsoft really started pushing in Office 365. So you've probably heard of it before. As I said at the beginning, it is mainly for user data. So users' documents that they're working on or they don't want to share with their whole team. Backup, so it can also be used to back up the document and desktop folders of a laptop. So if the laptop was to die, have its hard drive broken, etc., everything's backed up into the cloud on OneDrive. It's used as the sync tool, so the OneDrive program is used to sync SharePoint, and it was also used for basic sharing, so sharing files with 1 or 2 team members. One thing I'll add that's not actually on the slide is if you're in the Teams chat feature, so not the Teams feature, but the chat feature, and you share a file within there, that's actually using OneDrive to share.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what I'll demonstrate, 1 second. It's my sharing button. I'll keep this one rather short, just show you the program, or SharePoint actually. So if you want to quickly sync something with Windows, you just hit sync, getting ready to sync, and it's synced. So I just synced up,
synced works.
synced. Health, safety, and wellness documents folder general is now showing up here, and you can see those 4 files matched the 4 files that are showing up here. So that's very useful if you're going offline and you want to be able to edit files. At the moment, these are just thumbnails pointing to SharePoint Online. If I want to store them on site, I can just right-click on it, click Always Keep on this device. They'll start syncing, and then come with the green tick to say that they're saved on my device. Taking up too much room, right-click, free up space, and they'll go back to cloud icons. Now, the SharePoint program, I can't actually show you, it's just on my other screen. I'll drag it across. If you jump into the OneDrive program, so this will be in your taskbar, right-click Settings, you'll get into this page here. One of the things to note here is your backup. So if you want to back up my files and desktop documents, pictures, folders to OneDrive, so they're protected and available on other devices, just click there, click back up. It takes about 4 or 5 seconds, and all the user's documents, desktop and photos will be saved in OneDrive so they can get to them from the cloud. So one thing that is probably good not to do when you're using OneDrive is to oversync the amount of sites down to your PC. Everyone's computer or PC laptop has a limited amount of storage. And if you try syncing everything, you're going to fill up that space, and your computer will also slow down as it tries to index and find all the files everywhere. So try to keep the files that you're syncing just to the ones that you need to sync or that you're currently working on. If you want to delete something, and this is one thing that you should try to train all your users on, let's say I'm finished with health, safety, wellness in general. I can't just hit delete here. If I hit delete here, that's going to delete it out of SharePoint, which would be a very bad thing to do. First, you've got to click stop sync. It's going to stop syncing it, but the files that are on my computer will stay there until I manually delete them. So stop sync. I'll go like that, and then you'll notice it disappeared. That's now safe to delete, and my list here has dropped down a few. So I constantly keep it, less than 10 just to keep things manageable and keep my computer running nice and fast without clogging up the hard drive. I think that's probably the main features with OneDrive.
And I guess what that can be useful for is people who are traditionally used to working out of the File Explorer rather than going through the online version. But I mean, the ultimate goal is getting people working off the web version.
Yep. No, that's for sure. So that's OneDrive, not to be confused with SharePoint, but very useful in its own right.
All right. All done?
Yep.
Brilliant. So we've just got a couple more slides to go. Feel free to start firing through any questions if you got them. We're getting towards the end. So we're just going to have a quick chat about IT process and governance for these particular tools. Alex, would you like to
have a
quick work through these?
So one thing, and probably the most important thing, is self-evolution is important. We get a lot of companies coming to us saying, let's do a SharePoint migration, and they're expecting to basically move everything into SharePoint and then have it locked down, and that's it. It's never going to change, kind of thing. We've made our structure and we're going to live with it. If you think back to the diagram right at the beginning from Microsoft, where the sites are changing where they're located, SharePoint really is designed to be moved pretty much constantly. It should be in a state of flux, depending on what you're working on at the moment. So Teams and SharePoint channels should be being created, destroyed on the daily, or if
maybe
not
on the daily.
weekly. You do want to put some some restrictions in place to make sure they're documented and that everyone knows what they are. You can change the settings in the Teams and SharePoint Admin Center. Have a play. There's lots of different settings you can change. Too many to go through, but just make sure you've documented what they are and that people know why the decision was made. Again, what you're trying to do is stop something called shadow IT. So that's where you overly restrict something to the point where people start using some other form of communication. Real quick example, let's say you block the use of reactions or GIFs in chat. And some people are like, well, I kind of want them. I know, I'll just set up a Facebook group and start using Facebook for my work communications. I have seen this happen. You want to restrict that because you as an organization, you don't have any oversight on that. It's also taking information out of your corporation and putting it on Facebook, which we all trust. Now, in saying that, there are some areas that do need to be locked down. So general and the human resources are general, like if you've got a general channel that you're going to have in Teams, maybe make it so people can't post there. Only a few people, maybe managers, can post there who are allowed to send out notifications to the organization. This stops general channel just from being a dumping ground for all information and makes it very targeted, and so people only will know to look there if there's important information coming out. Human resources, for obvious reasons, if it's sensitive, and also sensitive areas, board, that kind of thing, definitely you can lock them down more, maybe put some restrictions on all those things and stop people from sharing data externally. Awesome. So
All right.
anything else you want to add there, Lucy? Conan?
No, I think just, yeah, the main one is absolutely let people, don't be afraid to let people play with it a wee bit themselves. You know, if they're helping build it from the ground up a wee bit, they're going to be a lot more invested in using it, and it's going to be a lot more built for purpose for them from the start as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So we've got a few questions and answers. Please fire them through. We're here to help. Got a few minutes. Let's do it.
I can throw out a few questions. So collated a couple that were also on the chat. So firstly, do we need to use a backup service for Office 365?
Yeah, Microsoft explicitly says that it doesn't back up, you know, Office 365 data. So that's emails, SharePoint, that kind of thing. And saying that Microsoft's systems are pretty good. They're Microsoft, but they do have issues from time to time. So I'd always recommend having a third-party backup, just in case if something goes wrong. And saying also Microsoft doesn't keep data forever. So if something's deleted and then deleted from the recycle bin, that's it gone. So if you got third-party backup, that can also protect you from that scenario. Yep.
Cool. Next one. So Nick has said, if you migrate existing files into SharePoint, will the existing security permissions apply, or do you have to renew the permissions or review the permissions?
So the permission structure is quite different, Nick, on SharePoint than it is on a file server. It's quite a different way of thinking. So yeah, the permissions are set from the team site level. So any files that are put into that team get the team site permissions. They're designed in a way that any of the managers can quickly add and remove people from the team. So you don't need IT setting up the team's permissions or anything like that. You can just get the managers of the teams to do the permissions. So no.
Generally speaking, Nick, if you were to want to migrate, and this is a common thing, hey, we want to migrate our file server to SharePoint as is, where is, so to speak, it does require, there are tools out there that will technically do it, but you probably don't want to do that. It's kind of like just lifting a house and chucking it over. You kind of got to set the foundations. You got to structure it. You got to make sure it's right. Otherwise, it'll be a short-term thing. Next question. There's a couple rolling in here. I want to sync my users' home drives in brackets server shares from our on-premise server with each user's OneDrive. Is that possible?
It's not officially supported by Microsoft. But that would be what you were trying to do. So what you would do, or I would do, is go user by user, copy their data from the user's home drives on the server, and just start using OneDrive as the single point of truth. And don't necessarily want to use home drives as well, because there's no points there's no point to use a home drive if you've got OneDrive. It does the same thing, and it's in some ways more powerful, because you'll be able to get those documents on the internet anywhere, not limited to RDS or a VPN or anything like that.
Next, Y has said, how do you make a communication site like a public static website?
So as a public static website, you can't make communication sites public. They are internal. It's an intranet, not a website. How to make one, I can probably quickly share my screen again.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but there is ability to make certain SharePoint sites public.
Certain features, not the whole thing. There used to be a feature to do that, but I think Microsoft took it away. Yeah. If I just quickly share my screen here, if I click create a site, you'll see I get two options here. Communication site.
You showing us something,
Hold
Alex?
on, you're not sharing yet, Alex.
I'm not.
You got to kick me off.
I've got to click share. There you go. Zoom lesson 101. You click create site, and you get to choose between the two. So communication site, you can choose some layouts or just create a blank one, and you can paint your own picture here. So that's how you do a communication site. Yep. You want to share your screen again, Lucy?
Yep.
Anonymous attendee says, would you help us set up our SharePoint with our team so that it's hub-focused structure as you've shown here? The answer is yes. You might just need to let us know who you are, and we can assist you. I think that is all for the questions. So one question I'll probably ask for you guys is what license is required to access all three Teams, SharePoint and OneDrive with all the features that you've demonstrated here?
That's a bit of a difficult question to answer. The one that I would go for is Microsoft 365 Business Premium. That comes with all three of those features and more, which certainly allows us as the IT team to do a lot more things. However, in saying that, Microsoft 365 Business Basic, I think it's called, will let you access all these resources as well.
And E1, and if you're a not-for-profit, E1 is obviously free. So most licenses will allow you to do this. The only ones that don't are if you go with Exchange Online or maybe just the Office 365 Professional Plus type licenses that just come with the Office package. Some people believe they're on 365, but actually they've just got the Office software, which technically is just the subscription. But yeah, most of you, I would imagine that most people in this room, if you're on 365, if you've got your email in Office 365, you will be able to access all of these functions. But feel free to let us know if you've got any questions. And last but not least, will we have access to this recorded presentation? Yes, you will. And in 3 or 4 days, we'll when we get back together, we'll chuck it up and we'll message it around to everyone attending and that didn't make it. Cool. Good timing, 3 p.m.
On the dot.
Yeah, on the dot. So thank you to everyone that attended and joined us for the questions. There's one more poll I'm just going to put up for the people that have hung around. So one more poll. We would like you to fill out our feedback form. So I just thought I'd chuck this up.
And I think, Conan, am I right, in that feedback form, it's also got the option if you want to be notified of future webinars as well. So if, we do run these pretty regularly, if you're keen to keep attending, jump in there and fill that out and we'll make sure that you're on the list if future ones happen.
Yes, that's right. Thank you for that. In fact, for those that are honest, yeah, we would appreciate it if you do fill out the feedback form. It does help us, and it should pop up as you depart. And yeah, if you would like some information on this, on SharePoint, OneDrive Teams, some help on migrating, or to just ask a few questions, reach out to us. There's an email here that you can use, or feel free to, on the previous slide, webinar at the IT team, or contact those who you know. I'm sure you can get hold of someone in the IT team. So yeah, from all of us, thank you very much for attending and fairly well.
See ya.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.